나상 얘기 고도 교육이 고교육 신도 고교육 치 송바디게 자사 안에 가르스네 이 직송비의 롱디아 안에 밀로아레스 베나 동유도베기 안에 상이 롱디게 나신 베티나시레스 자사 디네 인자다 안에 신도 고교육 안에 간스도 고레람나 안에 무슨 도투야요 말랑아주기 무슨 도투 말레스 안에 가소레 되네 제박에 따라 되네 제바세다 되래야 아니 지금 모두 비제박에 또 두고 말해서 안에 같이 가르쳐고서는 이실롱라 되네 또 오래서 이실롱라 되네 또 오래서 근데 대신 나도 나님보를 찍되기 또나 디레티쇼 디고시로와 나서 지산 신도 고교 도백에 신도 고교세 또야 돼 가는 또 이제 롱레된 또 그러마도 모두 비제박이 또 두고 말해 모습이 채면 또 두고 말해지래. 대비시면 시험입니다. 다들 저거 시에서
Phenomena that are extremely hidden. Only the Buddha has realized them and has realized them in a way that is unerring or faultless or infallible. So how can someone like ourselves come to realize phenomena that are extremely hidden? Well, we cannot realize them directly, and we cannot realize them inferentially based on reasons, but we can come to realize them in dependence on conviction in sutras.
이제다 신도고 유배 상기 송되게다 진바당라 때네 롱주 중그리에서 송다 네 수심 송월라 때네 하다미 고방 토그리에서야다 먼저 고방 토그리에서야다 세보 공발라 때네 도단 템바 용그리에서야다 되네게 상기 송되게 신도고 유 롱디게다 신도고 유 템비 롱디서 제에서 송송 데라서 뭐 보여로다.
So for example, one can come to realize extremely hidden phenomena in dependence on sutras, such as, for example, from ethical restraint comes about rebirth in high realms, from generosity comes about material comfort. So this can be realized, but only in dependence on having conviction in sutras.
나델라야 니제바 지디갑라 니네게 용고를 빼네 짐바 당와된 론주 중국에서 외대 짐바 당와 론주 중국의 신도 고교이나 근데 중수 고교 차기도 우스 그래서네 유디 짐바 당와전 유디 주변에 디 제부 연구여 봐디 네 규델에 되는 제부 연구도 보토로 와 도토로 와서야지 네 도스네 네 대제바 제야라 되는 연구를
If we take the statement, from generosity comes material comfort, or generosity is the cause of material comfort. This is a phenomenon that is extremely hidden to us, but it can become a slightly hidden phenomenon, in that one can come to recognize the causal relationship, that from such a cause, a particular result follows. So therefore, a phenomenon that at one point is extremely hidden can become slightly hidden.
데네게 제바치도 갑라네 지 규디 예비 김선진의 제보도 예바도 쭉쭉 말해지래. 규디에는 인지메지 제보 연구가 말했어. 제보 예비 김선진의 규여바 쭉쭉 그랬어. 마도 규 예비 김선진의 제보 예바 쭉쭉 말했어. 베네 규디 사본 누구께 규사본 지어바이네 누구 요래서 가서는 제보 규사본 요러발라나 누구 마진이래 사본의 메시샤는 유예요 말와. 제가 규예비 김선진의 제보 예바 쭉쭉 말했어. 제보 예비 김선진의 아니 규예바 쭉쭉 그랬어. 자, 내내 직제바 제하다든 직다 돌아자야 뭐 보는 거래.
So an area of discussion that's good to have in mind is that if there is a cause, there won't necessarily be a result. But conversely, if there's a result, there necessarily was a cause. For example, seeds may or may not sprout, But a sprout necessarily came from a seed.
That is what they say. That in ma that diri kasada diri sugar soya kidang zugiton dadi din ma sungore she sungba taras and jarum checker sungosne dorna sorta dor diknyel ya she dit pa su dondadi dirichi ma sonsha by nasi or dorna ngondo ngele juba le zambi give sungrap control lan jeba namna shine deba tobe or.
Let's turn to the text and continue from where we left off this morning. So looking at the bottom of page 24, at the paragraph there from His Holiness's commentary. In brief, through coming to know the conqueror's scriptural compositions as well as their commentaries, which are all aimed at the achievement of high status and definite goodness, one will attain faith in them.
Aneng tarbada tamji kimbo ko yoba ele je di aneng ngondio ko bon dubala nju anu surim sumya da jimala sobata duyal je dene ane ngele duye gyudela ane anjuki deshi shoga shebana shi denshi nelu dan tombani tobe sherap all this nyamsu nyamlen jebale din dukwe badi dene gi ba tablam denshi be gewi songrap de songdelya ansang yi songdelya ane 지게 대신 되게 덴바의 체매 소속이 제바지 체매 도연도 아니 상이 송딜라 밀로와인 바 도연도 될래 아니 제래 신에 대바 토부리에서 상이 송이 되네 덴바들랑 아주 제바지 도연도 체매 도연도 아니 신에 도바 토부리에서 대신 덴바 송와된 아주 제바지 덴바시 체매에서나 상이 송이 덴바시 덴베 도디 밀로와레서 등이 투고로 되네 신에 대바 토부리에서 네 공제에서도 공제를 디우 공제에서 다 변에 덴베시 손시베 산지 손유 공제 공부르다 파바 토멜라서 손시베다 라마는 주 손시베 공제디게 네 대안 신의 대바 토그레서 손랍 공제를 제바 남나 신의 대바 토그에 토베에서 제도 산지 손시베 딘신내로 덴바다 신도 고교 덴바 동반이 덴비기 룽제제디 경어도 참여 주요도 안에 산지 송디 안에 덴비 송디 밀로와인 바리 도토고 도도 당원에랑 신의 대바토서 원에랑 다 덴바레샤 노트자오기네 민도 선비기 먼저 세명 해봐니 이거로 봐 제가 신의 대바토 봐서 제가 디토바인자 니기 공제다 상이 den시 송비기 den시 상지 송디기 공제다 베네 지게 자할 케비기 남유 공원제 잠시야다 되네 지게 왜 라메 케비 나 공제 잠시비다 디 공제디게나 될라야네 신의 대바토 그래서 돼 지산 개위 송랍제대 상이 송셔바데 공제에서도 디 공바 만제시베 자와디게 제산란 신의 대바토 그래서 디로 지바데
Based on what Geshe taught this morning, this first sentence, or first two sentences, should be changed a little bit. The next time it will be updated properly, but it'll be something like this. So what we have as two sentences will probably end up needing to be one. Because Geshe this morning referred to the highest type of faith, the most stable type of faith, as being the faith arising from knowledge. From knowledge comes faith. So the faith arising from knowledge. And that's what's explicitly written in the Tibetan here. So what we have at the beginning, through coming to know, that would need to change because that needs to go to the end. So faith from knowing would go to the end of the sentence. So it will be something like, in brief, the conqueror's scriptural compositions, as well as their commentaries, which are all aimed at the achievement of high status and definite goodness, having faith arising from knowledge in them, and then comma, and we'd go into the next sentence. So anyway, like that. The meaning is fine, but that term for the highest type of faith, again I mentioned this morning, isn't in the translation. So it would end, the sentence would conclude with faith arising from knowledge, and then comma, thereby induced by valid cognition, and so forth. Anyway, I hope a little clear. I'll say it again. So I'm just making this up right here, so it's not going to be overly eloquent. In brief, the concrete scriptural composition as well as the commentaries, which are all aimed at the achievement of high status and definite goodness, having faith arising from knowledge in them, and then comma thereby, and probably the rest is fine. So what this means is through where was this before? Yeah. So through coming to recognize that from good rebirths, high status, good rebirths in the high realms comes from the causes of ethical restraint, generosity, and so forth, and that liberation and enlightenment, so the definite goodness, comes from causes cultivated through the generation of the path, and so forth. Through realizing that with valid cognition or authoritative consciousnesses, then one gives rise to faith arising from knowledge towards the teacher, seeing the teacher as being an authoritative being, a valid being, as well as his teachings as being unerring, unmistaken. And so too are the great treatises or commentaries composed about the sutras. One will come to recognize that these two are correct or faultless. So this, recognizing the teacher, his teachings and the commentaries to them, the shastras, the sutras and the shastras, as being correct and faultless, comes about through generating faith arising from knowledge with regard to high status and definite goodness.
Da sanji ge sung da sti gong zhe li xin ne de ba tu gres. Dene to yo de an ga ya sun de ba sanji jum den de. De ba sanji jum den de gi an sung de le ya an xie ne de ba to yo de an de ba sanji jum den de le xie ne de ba ji to gres. De ba sanji jum den de sung de la de jing a zo sung de li ge xie ma de yi de bi sung de la 典型内陆的多人对商业送于典型对面送的我呢了电把热下拿出人民都上边个什么好过用的的人也不来上边上的现在电把头发就是典型对面送的按东半夜对面送新土过去对面东送的个这些送的了些个话现在的送的这个绝对的按照前面个把你的他送的个电把那些大家让热下送的白呀或热下上边呀或者上边的电把的利用的现在电把那个话 ဒီနာရှင်တစာကြီးရဆုံးဒီကြီးတင်ရှိတင်ပြီးဆုံးကိုကွန်တယ်ခဲပါနမျိုးစုံရှိပြီးကွန်တယ်တယ်လာရရှင်နေတဲ့ပါထုတ်ကြရဲဆက်ကြီးဒီတော့ဒါဒီရှင်ရလေတဲ့ရှက်ပါချင်းကျစားတာဒီနဲ့တဲ့တွင်ပါဆန်ရကျွမ်းနေတဲ့တာဒီဂျင်ဂျူဖောက်ယူရလိုပင်ချင်းပေါ်နမ်လာန်ချင်းမဲ့ကြံပြီးဒီကွင်းနေကျဲကြောက်တာမစကျစား 商业以送可能来电视电表送到东半夜电表送到新都国际电表东送的绝些多少节的了送的了米路啊，因把多少对，但米路啊热下，拿出早起呢，米电把热下上边个米路啊多少对，但那电把把商业的来样，安尼米路啊因把多土的，现在电把商业专门电当，现在商业专门电来样，安尼前面个吧，年年安尼就米路啊因把前面机会把好过过了，电多少对，电但商业专门电来，现在电把土过了些。 对吧？上有专门跌宕噻，第八腿的跌宕噻的，对吧？上有专门跌宕噻，上有专门跌宕噻，第八头，捏了上有送的了呀，那跌八头，现在跌八头，今天上有可能了，现在跌八头噻。
As we've seen in the first part here, that was read out before, that through coming to gain valid cognition in, or maybe better translated as authoritative consciousnesses with regard to the Buddha and his teachings. One will give rise to faith arising from knowledge in relation to the Buddha and his teachings, which have as their principal meaning, or their primary goal, the achievement of high status, good rebirth, and definite goodness. And thereby, one will have authoritative, recognize the blessed Buddha. So this is now, from the second line, recognize the blessed Buddha as being an authoritative being, a valid being.
미디 정보를 말해서야지 간에 사고를 미디 기시에 그디나 기시에 덴바냐냐 시기바나 안나가 저기 거기 기시에바데 그디나 덴바냐냐 시에바데 다가라 시에바나진 돈달라 다다 리기바나 안나가 저기 정보 거기 기시에바데 덴바임 하고 그러와다 거기 기시에데 그 덴바레샤서 덴바임 하고도 아니 미디 정보를 샤세데 신이 미디 정보임 하고 그러 정보 미디 기시에데 가리나 하 먹었나 아주 미디 정보 레베스는 하고 두 말봐. 제가 미 계시 가르치면 거기디나 계시디 셰바들이야. 노트 균에면 바다다 임바 짱짱짱 시기요바나. 아니 디기 셰바도 그 계시에 사상 정보를 샤스. 다다 레샤스. 안디 제라 아니 가르치면 미디 정보를 그 준식 말해. 그 미디 배지 정보요래 사지. 진에 그 계시디 셰바디 된다 덴바 임바다 하고 되네 하고 제라야 미디 정보 임바 하고 근데 제가 그 기시에 덴바레셔서 이치려도 아니 미코랑 장보레서 미들이 이시신이 거와 언디나시 상이 손셰베 손디 된다 밀로와 임바 장보 임바 밀로와 임바다 하고 요도 아니 상이 디송모 버 상이 좀는 데래야 장보 어서도 참마레 마노와다 마노와 된도 그 참마들이 신하고 그러 대집에 집바로 와다 비데.
To make this clear, we can think of in our own life, if we meet someone new, how do we ascertain whether this is an honest person or not? If we just base that on a good feeling that we have with this person, it's not at all reliable. Let's take, and for example, if this person, for example, is giving us instruction or advice about something we really don't know anything about, how do we know that we can rely on what they're saying? How do we know that this person is trustworthy? We really do not. But over time, if we keep encountering this person, hearing what they have to say, we come to recognize that every time we meet this person, they are communicating to us in a way that is honest, trustworthy, and straightforward. And we have a valid or reliable reason, to have trust in them, to have faith in them, to believe what they have to say. Even if in both regards to when they're talking about something where we have knowledge and we can see that it's correct, as well as in areas where we have no knowledge. Because we're recognizing, or have come to recognize, based on long-standing experience with this person, that they are trustworthy, they are honest. So too with the Buddha Dharma. When we come to investigate well, based on knowledge, the meaning of the Buddha Dharma, and come to see that the Buddha Dharma is, or the teachings of the Buddha are unmistaken, we can also, having given rise now to faith based on knowledge in relation to the teachings of the Buddha, we can recognize thereby that the teacher of those teachings, the Buddha himself, is also a valid being, an authoritative being.
Dene di jenju kla wada di jenju payu gyu loben namla ang tseme tabi degyu nine jewa dangmas. Chededa di jeju se dajinye la sangyi yu sung shebe sungi gongzhe la payu yi lama namki gongba jejiba gongzhe de la ane miluwa yinba to yongdu tseme to yongdu ane di to bala de gongzhe de gel to be gongzhe zomkan la payu yi lama ane bine pawayu yaga dine pawayu lobandike ki deya ane tseme kibu yinbada andelia sosuke da konzu songyo diye gongba jaya de nor mindo tata resha sanbeke da de tseme 장be sosuke 돈다 콘주 숨겨도 돈다 체면에 봐니 체면 또하지 안 콘주 숨겨도 다다래샤 선배게 니네 대바기 그 대회니네 기기리 세월로다.
This is borne out as we go into the next sentence. Thereby, induced by valid cognition, heartfelt faith and respect will arise for the teacher of these scriptures, the blessed Buddha. Moreover, and his followers, the great masters of India. One will have faith arising in knowledge in relation to the Shastras or the commentaries written by the great Pandits from India, going through the same process of coming to understand the teachings, investigating them well, seeing that the teachings are without error, and thereby recognizing that these great Pandits, they too are reliable sources.
다 대충 세래 디나신 소리 대충 다다 랑라 람 만으로 됨비기 기위 신예당 아니 기위 신델라야 아니 체명에 와다비기 되고 기수 그래 이제 대충 다다 랑라 람 만으로 됨비기 기위 신인 delaya ane karasana ngāngyūki tenshī nēlu sāngyī yu sūmbā nāshīn sāngyī yu sūngi gōngchē ane bāyō kēpā gyāgā pandrūt nā yu gōngchē dēkile pā tā gōngchē dēki tēne ane ngāngyūki sāngyī yu sūngi dōndā di tenshī nēlu dā kōwā di ngāngyūki sōsūra lam tuñkēn kiwī shīn dīki dāngbō ngāngyū lākbō mā tō dāngbō ane ngāngyūki di gyāgā gōngchē dēnā 하고 두말 산유송 돌로 봐 하고 두말와 당보 간 사고라스네 기위 신인디 안줄레 람디 파츠 딘딘 레스파라트 되 데네 안주 델레 롭종 제네 롭종 제나는 도시네 아니 베네 야 공제데 겨 바다 아디야 다가이마 데네 공제 델레 데네 산이 돈돈 도이 송디 바다네 데네 하고에도 당보 안주 람든 제간디 안줄레 기위 신인기 람든 제 제사 데니기 남든 제주도 지내는 대신일로 체명해 봐니서도 어당이 개위 신인기 할야 땜바도 즉 만어와다 따다 지산유 순반다가라 손샤 선비기 소식에 체명해 봐니도 디네 개위 신인들이야 아니 지게 체명장 베기 대귀기리 해서 대바기리 해서
Here one is generating firm and unshakable faith in first the teachings of the Buddha himself, and thereafter on the commentaries to the sutras, the shastras, as well as the pandits who taught those. Now, how did we come to this point? How did we come to gather sufficient knowledge and be able to skillfully reflect on that knowledge so as to be able to recognize the authority that the Buddha and his teachings, as well as the commentaries and the commentators, are all authoritative or valid? It is due to the teachings, guidance, and care from our spiritual teachers, from our lamas. Because it is our lamas who have taught us the meaning of the sutras and the shastras. It's through them, our individual illuminator of the path, that we have come to recognize that the Buddha and his teachings, as well as the commentaries and the commentators from the Arya lands, from India, are valid, are authoritative. And in this way, we come to recognize that our Lama, he is too guiding us in an unmistaken manner, and therefore is suitable to rely on wholeheartedly. And in this way, the faith arising from knowledge also arises in relation to our spiritual mentor. This then is referred to in the next sentence, now with the top of page 25. Similarly, one will be able to generate firm and unwavering faith and respect for our spiritual mentors.
안디로 당은 저기 남보 롭장 지디 갑라 안내가 저기 다 안줄래야 오소 직 람든 제인디 나주 오소 람딩의 기위신 차고마도 나주 공부를 줍다 안 파바 토멜라서 바다 로바 아야 대바다 베네처라라서 콘주진의 제지 콘주는 최용오소 쉬 마녀로와 제사다 나한줄래 최용오 땡게 개위 신이 마진에 한 Dunga Tempa said dire, Kunjo Tempa said dire, and Diba, Pambalaya, and the Lam Yamlen Chehore, Lam Yamlen Jabana, and Tarvasada, Tamji Kimbo to Sutugo, Essaji, Manganzola, Lamneche, Yamlen Jeda Rimba to Chehore, Shason. Jezadi, and Denigi, Jike, Deso, Kahasungore, Sene, and De Ma, and the Chik, Benekihargi. Me kepi bandu namki pawa thome la so pa ta kombolu ro desu na la ya shu na la ya chiza dunga tempa kunju tempa an lam de ko ten du su sung yore sa je nganzo le ra thwe chi go ro te go ro wa an de so ja an kunju ge sung ba gong ba khawa thi go ra sen san ye jum nen de gi an nga zo ten shi yul dang bo wa na se le chu yu ko lo ko tempa shi cho ko wa re chiza dunga tempa kunju tempa an go ten lam de du ko wa re so wa re sa du chen ra thwe shi je ma de na du nyam len je da rin ba ma den du chen sam dang wa she yu nu ge wei xin song ba za dang ran ju ge du chen ge wei xin song ba de dang bo thwe dang bo chai mong bo thwe an thwe bi ge den de la ma zo yang do sam dang je ba je de ne je ba je ne an ran ju ge de di an dung ga den ba yin ba de dung ga den ba de kun ju de ba de che me nge ba ni je za da kun ju den bi ge gu zo den jin ma ri ba de an ba nian po de ka san da me ba to bi dong ba ni to bi xie ra gom ba le de ne gom je nian po bang tu ye ba de sam da di gom ne ne bang yo de ne ka san tar ba se tu yo ba de du chen sam da ji che sa da che me nge ba che me do yo du da ka ri ong re se ne da ngo ne san deshi ge shin yin jing a le lam den je ba ngo ne ra da ra re sha san bi ge so su ge ti so de ne ge shin yin le che me nge ba ni bi ge da de ba ge da de ne ge gong zhe san yi song ji bu gong zhe da song bu lama de ge le ne che me nge ba ni bi ge gong ji de ba ge ne san yu jum den de le ne che me nge ba ni bi ge de yi de ba ge je na no du che yong go le se ji dan da di song go da.
Our spiritual development and the knowledge upon which it's based, we have received directly from our spiritual mentor, not just the mere imparting of knowledge, but our spiritual guidance. We are not able to receive this guidance directly from the great pandits from ancient India, such as Nagarjuna and so forth, nor from the Buddha Shakyamuni himself. We have been and continue to be guided by our spiritual mentors. It's through his guidance that we've come to understand sufferings. To the extent we've come to understand the breadth of suffering, as well as its origin, has come about in dependence on the skill, care, and guidance of our spiritual mentor. So too have we come to understand in dependence on our spiritual teacher that whilst we are currently bound in the suffering realms of samsara, this is not how we have to remain. This can be brought to an end. It can be brought to a cessation. And there is an unmistaken method to do so, cultivation of paths. We've also come to understand through our spiritual teacher that this was taught by Buddha Shakyamuni, the historical Buddha in Varanasi in the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. That's where these Four Noble Truths, these Four Arya Truths were taught. Through hearing repeatedly over a sustained time, teachings from our spiritual teacher, and repeatedly over a sustained period, reflecting on those teachings, we will come to recognize the validity of the teachings on, for example, the Four Noble Truths. That through cultivating true paths within us, we will bring a complete cessation to the origins or the causes of suffering, and thereby suffering itself, and we will abide in a state that is liberated or freed from suffering, a state of lasting happiness. We will gain certainty of this, and thereby we will recognize that our spiritual guide is someone suitable to rely on. We will recognize this with a valid cognition, with an authoritative consciousness that he is someone we definitely, certainly can rely upon.
아니네. 데네 덴바 니 가네 셰비 람데르 수신도 슈베기 조 게든 남랑 대바다 그바 귤메도 귤도 메비게 덴보기 뉴라스.
And I read the last of the sentence, but I'll read the whole sentence again. Similarly, one will be able to generate firm, unwavering faith and respect for our spiritual mentors, who presently teach us the unmistaken paths, and for the Sangha, who are our friends, abiding properly on the paths on which the teacher himself traveled.
덴바 니 가네 셰비 람스 덴바 상예 줌데 코로 강네 셰비 람스 그딘 가와네 데조야게 람데시 그러와 제사다 코르 당보 상예 줌네데 당보 상예 줌네데 상예 마레 가주나 지바레야레 코와 네데 지바레스 제사 데기 네네 아니 가호 조호레스 샤바레스네 탈비 탐지킴 보고 발이야 샤바레스 샤바 토바레스 샤바레스 내내 조야게 람데 가레스네다 람데 람냠는 제네 아니 조하레스 제자데 상유점네데 람냠는 제발레 때네 아니 상유고바 토바레시로와 제자 디 대신도스데 대신의 슈비게 조게된스데 제자 상기게 람지데 냠는 제바 나신 다데 냠는 제신 비기 조게된 바서 파베게 파베 가사 제수 차사 아니 라네 신데 대바 토그레스 대바당 구버 규드메바 아니 교균에 줘야메가 땜부치기도 그래 땜부치 뉴라 스기리에 제래 땜부치 투그레스 대바 땜부치 투그레 교함에 균에메겐 대바 땜부 교균에 줘야면 땜부치 투그레스
Reading again the second part of the sentence. And for the Sangha, who are friends, abiding properly on the paths on which the teacher himself traveled. This reminds us that the being that arose in this world, this Buddha Shakyamuni, was once an ordinary being no different from ourselves, bound within the suffering realms of samsara, bound by afflictions. But he traveled along paths, which means he strove in his mental development to give rise to paths and develop mental paths and develop them ever stronger towards the final goal of enlightenment, towards the attainment of the principal meaning of the Dharma, enlightenment. So this being who arose as the Buddha traveled along these same paths which he later would present. And right now, there are many beings who are our friends, our companions, the Arya Sangha, who are traversing those same paths, in other words, are generating them and developing them ever further within their own continuum. Reflecting on this gives rise to a strong, stable faith in our companions on the path, the Sanghachu.
나라 상기 템바 상기 좀되네 그런 당보 상기에 말에 시사다 냠는 진에 상기 고방 토외 주는 냠는 집에 림바디 냠는 림바지도 신에 냠는 림바디는 상기 고방 토바래 제사 디네자 상기기 람 냠는 림바디 노주 균이 매바 디 냠는 제바나 상기 고방 톱투고요 바디 다하고 두고와 대신 한주 대신 내룩디 또형도 대신 내룩다 동반이 남자한테 또형도 또발에 때네 갈소르스네 디냠네 제발에 때네 제바이나 안 타바 톱투고다 탐지기 먹고 톱투고요 바디 노르메 바디 또바인자 데니게 상지 람 덴시베 람 냠네 지킨 파베 가사 디기야 이네야다 빼야보레 세디수게다 람마노와 냠네 지고스 데니게 데솔레 안 데바 템부기 교환메 바데바 응고레 세디숭고르와
We're seeing in the second part of the sentence that the Sangha, who are our friends, abiding properly on the paths which the teacher himself traveled. So this shows that the Sangha are training in exactly the same way as the Buddha did. Because the Buddha attained the final state, the state of perfection, through training in a specific way. And the Sangha are training in that same way, recognizing that to give rise to a lasting transformation of the mind requires training in accordance with a specific sequence. So that would be the meaning of abiding properly. So they've attained paths through properly or correctly training, and they're progressing along these mental paths, attaining ever greater levels of the path through training properly. In other words, in the unmistaken manner in which the Buddha himself trained and taught others to train in. And this is then in specific relation to training in the Four Noble Truths in order to achieve liberation or enlightenment.
지사듯이 고고로는 문도다 녀래 주발하시되 지사당한테 다들 되는 저기 나디 디나 송샤바디 저기 냠는 지야래 당보 간데스 직고주레시데 나 저기 내가 지켜와 치말 하다 미고 방토백이 직 토백 된다려야 비수 제배인나 당보 가서 가르삼 당고래시네 안지나 냐와다 이다 세팅한 저기 베진한 다제 안데 뎁다다 강하다 되는 여바 삼다마도 무슨 통하면와 나 dun조기 릭딩 안저 무슨 뭐 통고로와 진짜 되는 인자다 냐와다 이다도 dun조기 들려 강하디게 삼다에 당한 저기 두스타한 저 다वे는 아주 미당 dun조이디 니라 캬버 가르도람나 아주 밀리아 안에 디기 마와다 안에 강한 여바는 세사비야가 안에 지게 데네기 강아유데 강아 세야게 탑람 여바다 네번에 면주지에 탑람 여바 안 탑람 남주 베제다네 안에 강아 망고 세투에 디기 줍투에 여바디 아주 밀리아 연된 캐셔디 여바래 세자 dun조라 디메 바로와 디네지기 캬바 통에 땅아 주게 오다 직다 개와 치마에네 다 지게 만소는 마게 와지 제고도 개와치말 하당 안에 하게 안에 밀리야 직게 맞는데 지금은 되네 개고도 선배게다 아주 당보 삼다디 만송기 동화디게 삼다 다 딜레데 타고도 선배 타르게 삼바데게 다 되네 안에 가르토고를 개와치마데 다 하다 미고 와지 제딜렌 디나신 하다 미고 와 토고도 선배기 디도녀게 dum바데게 다 당고 삼다디레 디삼다네 다 저기 단 토고고나 단 저기 개와치마 하라미고 토벨이야 유 베제 가르쳐고래랍나 진짜 류가 이숨 예제된be 추름송해야 되지 추름송 진짜 류가 이숨 요건에 자지샹이야 세외자와다 뇌배자와 저기는 지금에 선배가 삼다디 디 안에 야도 삼다디 아주 개와치 하라미고 토벨 규삼 차고래 안데려야 안지 데리아 로바 안에 가서는 진비 냠내자 동에 진비 냠내자다 안에 쇠복음이야다 안에 전주스만 라소바다 언두신 안디 담말이야 저 개와치 말하다 미고바 토벌 쇼스비 몰람자야 돼 디차고 디 땅아 저거 원주 주비기 주로시 차고로 와다
Of these two terms that we came across last week, so the paragraph of commentary above where we started this week, those two terms were definite goodness and higher status. So definite goodness we've spoken about quite a lot, which means liberation and enlightenment. So higher status, this refers to rebirth in the higher realms, rebirth as a human or God. So here, as I just mentioned in the previous segment, the Sangha are training in accordance with a specific sequence. And this comes about through having recognized that this is how the Buddha trained. And his mind developed in a specific sequence and thereby developed those mental paths and eventually enlightenment. And this, if we want that same goal, is how we too should train. So in order to attain good rebirths in our future lives, the first part of the meditation is to reflect on the sufferings of the lower realms. Now, the sufferings that are experienced by beings who are in the spirit realm and the hell realm, these we cannot know directly or manifestly for ourselves, but can only come to know them through texts. But the suffering of animals, to a large degree, we can come to know directly for ourselves. And to the extent we can come to realize the sufferings that beings in the lower realms are experiencing right now, we'll see how much better a rebirth as a human is. And that then leads to a determination. I do not want to be born in the lower realms. I have to, once again, attain a rebirth in a higher realm as a human or God, attain a rebirth of higher status. And this then leads to the aspiration, I must bring this about. I can do it, and I must do it. And that aspiration is the indispensable foundation to cultivate powerful causes that will lead to good rebirths. And the principal cause is the ethical restraint of restraining one's body, speech, and mind. Or express it differently, the commitment not to bring harm to others through our physical behavior or our verbal communication or our way of thinking. This is the primary cause to attain good rebirth. And this needs to be accompanied by companion causes of generosity, patience, joyous perseverance, and prayer.
당한 주기 멜레 타르바 토비야기 돈달이야 안에 냠는 제바 토비 출도 냠는 제바에 당한 주기 당보 간을 고주르세데 다 당보데 대시 삼다나 지바래 나송이 동아디에 삼다 나송이 동아래 직마 다른 주기 미 된래 제와 된이나 디 된래야 알람 냠는 제야다 신여 주야데 등에서 차상 고갑 차상라기도 제산 둔조 나송이 된래 제와이나 디네기 차상 고갑을 하기면 제사당 나송이 된래 타르치네 제와 세텔이나 방원바이네 하다미 고방 톱지 딘델이야 나람 냠는 제 투약이 딘디 고구도 선배 대시다 다딩이데 삼당되어서 켜버려 가서 대시당 보들라 제와지만 하다미 고방 톱 고구도 선범마도 딘델이야 타바 톱에게 람 냠는 지게 딘 켜버지는 고구도 선거 말와 나데데 가서 무슨 어깨와 나다데 미나신 제와 치마에나 하다미 고방 톱고데 둔주에 제와나 디델라 람 냠는 제 고불 하기면도 지산 딘 켜버지 하다미 고방 톱고도 선배게 디 톱이야게 던 톱고도 선배 삼러시다 데네 안데 하다미 고방 톱고도 지산 디네 자다 딘델 양은 주고 코르게 둥아 냐와 디라 둔주라레 맞주 밀레 하라레 지산 코와레 끼친질로 둥아 라신 레샤 선배다 다디신 아주 주게 된시 셰바나지 둥하게 삼다나시 월 제사다 콜게 둥하데 제사다 나주게 다 둔조레 둥하 여바나시 아주 밀레야 안티강아 데네 도와 강아 딘도아 할라야 데네 강아 요르스비 둥하 제 삼다데 다 코와라 데니기 둥하디게데 마탄데 탑미누 선비게 데니게 코 둥하레 탈되게 삼로치게 삼로스 당고래 디단세에 제려야다 둥하데 직가령고에서는 규디 가르치었으네 규디 안에 군주에 대한 발레다 녀몽발라 티기도와 제사 레다 녀몽바딜레 안에 규녀 레다 녀몽바 방고도 제사 규다 레다 녀몽바 방베 방바디다 타르바레스 다디 방바디 타르바디 마토네 탑문우 셈베 타바 토고도 셈베게다 고미야디 디 나저고 공고거래세데
The cultivation of the causes for good rebirth, to achieve higher status, is the foundation to strive for and eventually achieve definite goodness, or liberation and enlightenment. The basis of the training for definite goodness is the training shared with those striving for a good rebirth. Those who are striving for higher status or good rebirth, they're only looking as far beyond this life, looking to their next life. But those who are striving for liberation have meditated far more deeply than that. They have come to recognize that having a good rebirth is indispensable for spiritual development. So they too will have developed a profound fear of rebirth in the lower realms. They will recognize that not only if one is born in the lower realms will one suffer in unimaginable ways, incomparable ways to the experience of humans, but one will not have the opportunity to continue one's spiritual development, in particular to train in calm abiding and wisdom. That is only possible if one attains rebirth in the upper realms of humans and gods. So therefore, in order to achieve liberation and enlightenment, one has to achieve a good rebirth, But to utilize that rebirth well, we need to create further causes than ethics, generosity, joyous perseverance, and patience. But one also needs to cultivate calm abiding and wisdom. So this then is done through reflecting further on true sufferings. This we looked at last night and briefly and this morning. And this meditation on true suffering starts by looking at the sufferings of the lower realms, and on that is built looking at the suffering experiences of the higher realms, coming to the conclusion that there is no state or result worthy of striving for as long as it is a result that remains bound within samsara. That it's samsara that needs to be abandoned. When that is recognized that there's nothing worthy of holding to, striving for within samsara, one will strive to identify the causes of remaining bound in samsara. And there one will also start to reflect on true origins, recognizing that what keeps us bound is our own mistaken consciousnesses, these afflictions. Then one will recognize that it's our afflictions that need to be abandoned, and in particular their root cause of ignorance. And when those have been abandoned completely, a being will then abide in a state liberated from samsara, liberated from the afflictions. Such a state is the state of liberation, state of lasting happiness.
Dinigi gomchinda korwi dungale targudu sempe samata dini korwi dungale tarbige tabasa togudu sempe samlodi dus gomne ane dusina gomyanda ganzam jilya ane zoimegi nyowa tenpa se zo me dangbo de la samda dangbo sam khugumda dangbo samda ya jeru gura ya sam yane yade samde dini yasi jeheji jetue ligor de zoji nyowa tenpa zo bezui chena ledugen bezui ma chena an male ba chi gura de zoji nyowa dene ganzam jilya bezui gyne chi mas ko yang rangsin korong ngangi korong na jeyo ji 용고래 세도가 되네 용고래세 제가 되니게다 코리 동화 될때 타고 될때 타바 토고도 선배 삼로디 그 랑신지 공강아 휴슈래 되게 지금 거래세 제 좀매기 용화 템파하셔야지 되니게다 내중에 삼바디 조아메비 용화 템파지 용바 있나 때 람귤에 깨바래서 초람바래서 어디 초람귤에 깨바래서 람귤에 깨바래서 때 좀매기 용화 마템 봐도 아니 람귤에 깨요 말해서
This aspiration to gain freedom, this is indispensable, and it arises in precisely the way, or through the meditations that I've briefly outlined. Meditating in this way again and again, repeatedly over a sustained period, one's aspiration to be free of samsara will arise ever more powerfully. And it will arise more powerfully, it will arise more easily in meditation, and it will last ever longer. So here the meditator needs to make continuous effort to generate this determination to be freed of suffering, accumulating teachings or knowledge from teachings, reflecting on them, meditating on them ever more, giving rise to the determination to emerge from the suffering realms of samsara. Through engaging this meditation repeatedly over a sustained period, the determination to emerge from the suffering realms of samsara will arise in meditation ever more easily and abide ever longer. Eventually, it will not dissipate. No intentional effort will be required for the determination to be freed from samsara will need to be made. It will spontaneously arise in a manner that is uncontrived. When the determination to emerge from samsara, definite emergence, arises in an uncontrived manner, needing no intentional effort, at that point, the path of accumulation is achieved. That is the marker of a person having generated a path in their own continuum, a path of accumulation. The marker is that of giving rise to uncontrived definite emergence, or more commonly called uncontrived renunciation. Prior to that, definite emergence may well be generated, but a path hasn't been accumulated because that definite emergence or that renunciation needs to be intentionally generated.
제가 예중의 삼발라는 코의 동화들에 타고도 코의 동화를 타네 탈비게 탈바 토고도 선비 삼로들에 예중의 삼바시고래 디 아주게 야네 곰지 쩌마 많이 바지 차송바나 예중 삼바 쩌마 많이 바지 귤에 깨바나 람귤에 깨와레세 제가 강사디 람귤에 깨다 마게셔디 세샤사데 산삼을 가르레스네 예중 삼바 쩌마 많이 바디 깨도 민도 따유레세 예중 삼바 쩌마 많이 깨나 람귤에 깨와레 예중 삼바 쩌마 많이 바지 예중 삼바 깨나양 쩌마 많이 바지 깨메나 아니 람귤에 깨요 말레세데 람 대강사디 람귤에 깨 마기 세샤사디 예중 삼바 쩌마 많이 바디 시고레데
The aspiration to be liberated, to attain liberation from samsara, is the mind of definite emergence, where one is definite or certain about needing to emerge from the suffering realms of samsara. That is generated in the manner as presented, through reflecting on suffering and its origins. For an extensive period, this needs to be intentionally generated, but when it no longer needs to be intentionally generated, it will arise spontaneously. It will be uncontrived. Then when definite emergence is uncontrived, that is the boundary of having attained a path, in particular, the path of accumulation. So prior to that, whatever strength of determination one may have to leave samsara, to emerge from samsara, as long as that intention needs to be intentionally generated, it is contrived, and therefore one has not yet generated a path. But when through repeated training, that intention to definitely emerge from samsara, when it is uncontrived, at that moment the path of accumulation has been achieved. One has crossed the boundary from being a being who is not on a path to being a being who has attained a path.
dine za da nga zugi nga zule samdang ba ina da nga zugi ni ma andi ji ge chue da dine ge tue che nyamle ma chi bi ne ga bla nye le ya ana nga zu dai kare ne da ka nga ro kare ne go chin na go na we na zile ne odi go na we na zile ta go do sem be samlo chi gi re ma do ani ko we dung la ta go do sem be samlo ki ta go tu go ma re ani ko we dung la ta be ta ba se to go do sem be ge samlo da go tu go ma ba da ya jing ga zo kya be dung ga o kya be dung de le ta go do sem be ge dung ga sam ma do ni ko we dung ne na ga zo dung yu dung di ge dele 타고 선배 삼로된 아주 리고로 받아 마도 아니 규 동화 세다 캬바 뒤지기 동화서 하고 그거 말 하 먹어도 dele 타도게 삼을 리고 말에 세선 타르바세디 암조 고요요 말 gün에 하고 그거 말 매바자 타바 토고 선배 삼을 리고 말와 지나 동화에 타도게 삼로된 아주 미다 돈로다 차상하려 다들 내가 가르강아 채나 디데 타고 선배 삼로지 용고로 받아 디디로와
When you are manifestly suffering, and you are, particularly when you're overwhelmed by that suffering, whether physical or mental, naturally the wish arises, I want to be freed of the suffering. For example, if one has a migraine, one doesn't need to think, do I want to be freed of this migraine? That just, one immediately knows, I want to be freed of this headache. And one will take some medication. But at that moment, whilst one is overwhelmed by the pain or the headache, there's no thought about needing freedom from samsara, attainment of actual liberation, merely from this manifest physical suffering. Similarly, on a cold day, naturally one will want to be liberated from this feeling of cold, the suffering feeling of cold, so one will put on clothes. No particular thought is required. There is the uncontrived thought to be freed. But even that uncontrived thought, to be freed from physical and mental pain, isn't ever present. It needs to be generated from time to time. This is the same level of aspiration to be freed of suffering that is shared amongst all humans and animals too. Liberation, through our Dharma studies, we have come to understand and will have varying degrees of a wish to achieve. But this is very or solely intellectual. It's seldom even contrived, let alone uncontrived. This is what we need to generate, an uncontrived wish for liberation.
Oda jingna sungu dunga sa nyewe dunga sa da desu chasan dunga re do nyu dunga sa chawa du ji dunga dire do da desu de ganga dele de ta gu da san bige nga zulya de jike gomba chimbu me na ya nga zulya dunga dele de ta gu du se be samlo ji da dele ta bige tarba pangbe pangba tarba le gura di tarba re do di dinga zu to gu do san bige nga zu samlo na le da ko be dunga 차산을 타고 sembe samlo직다 고여 동안에 조위게 타바세 톱나 sembe게 samlo직다 슈체션을 마성베다 samlo직 간주게 간주게로 용구로 와다 디용화데 가르스는 간주게 최게 주 퇴be게 퇴 기회 신연 점점네 안데 최대 퇴네 디게 퇴비게 될라데네 하는 간주 용구로 와다
The level of definite emergence that we have given rise to is that when one is experiencing manifest pain, such as a migraine, the thought will arise, I want to be liberated from this pain, from this migraine. But when the medication we've taken has worked its magic and our migraine is gone, no further thought for liberation appears. That is where we find ourselves. This is not at all where we need to get. But on the other hand, for example, when one's hearing teachings or reflecting on those teachings, the thought will arise, I want to attain liberation from suffering of physical and mental pain entirely, so I never experience any physical discomfort or even mental discomfort. Moreover, I understand the suffering of transient happiness. I no longer want to be deceived in this way. I no longer want to see transient pleasure as something worthy of striving. I want to be liberated from this too. And not only that, but I've come to recognize that these aggregates upon which I experience my suffering, these, as long as I have these contaminated aggregates, I will suffer. I want to attain liberation from that. So there we have given rise to a contrived a contrived definite emergence, where one wants to arise from even the subtler levels of suffering and attain freedom from samsara in its entirety. So here there'll be some variety in terms of the strength of our determination to emerge from suffering, but still it remains contrived. There we are all the same. Because it has only arisen now in dependence on the hearing teachings and reflecting on those teachings, but it has at least arisen. We need to deepen this reflection so that it can arise ever more powerfully and transformatively and eventually be uncontrived.
충충으로치 사본 뉴울 마선 충충도 고조 조조바로 싫어하다. 지상한주 탈바 토비에게 유기 사본 마선 뉴울 마선 충충으로치 간주길라 다디 촐 파케팅가스 차그와. 지상다디 야야지 야네 야도 가지고 두스네 야네 야도 삼다베네다 뉴버디 삼노디야 되어야 양시 코르투게르 차요도 되스 누가 체르고라 양시 삼다 어다 디레야 직직 공고도 사다 안 상인도 와다 직 공자고도 쓰지 양시 가지고 되는게 삼다에도 이 삼로도 되스 봄실 마선의 숙체시 루고로 와다 디네 자당 저기 타르바 토베알이야 아니 냠렌지 림바들야 안주 미니 되스 당보 가고 신고 말에 이내다 진최 퇴된 삼다도시 되거나 다 타르바세 토고도 지상 토고도 셈베 삼로디 제르직게 전되스 양시 숙체로 하는 중고로 와다 지상 디네자 이야기를 마선의 주고로 와다 딩아주디 딩아주기 냠녀로 쇼와디.
So all of us, we have the seed for liberation on our continuum. And we have experience of this, so we can know it's true by recognizing that at times, in dependence on hearing teachings and reflecting on them, the wish to gain freedom from samsara in its entirety does arise within us. So we know we have the seed for this. And if one has been training for a while, one will recognize that that seed may well have grown in strength. If not, hopefully through other areas of training, one has recognized that virtuous qualities can and do grow in strength, and how that comes about, which is through repeatedly over a sustained period hearing teachings and reflecting on their meaning. This, and this alone, is the manner in which these seeds of virtue, these virtuous seeds on our continuum, are nourished and grow. Without repeatedly over a sustained period hearing and reflecting, those seeds will not grow. But if we do apply ourselves, they will grow ever more powerful within us, and we will experience that development, that spiritual transformation within us. But the key here is to engage in this practice repeatedly over a sustained period, not sporadically, not just today and again in a fortnight, but tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And in this way, one continues to nourish these seeds, and they will grow in strength and in strength within us.
다디 내가 블랑아 삼다베나 제나다 코비 둥아 되는 레도와 셈베 델레 탈베 탈바세 되는 두아 셈비게 삼다나 디 신고로 받아 제나디 응아주기 되네 하고 받은 아주 하고 고로 받아 지대 소속에 냠뇽기 냠뇽으로 실리고로 받아 제자 되니 탈바세 둥아 되는 레도와 되는 둥아 코비 둥아 레도와 나 델레 탈고도와 셈비게 탈바세 되는 토고도와 셈비게다 탈바 체명에 봐 많이 봐 내가 아주 김제 삼단 되네 두 셈비 이제로 지내 아주 디 토고도 셈비 삼로디 내가 아주 길 여러 받아 여봐 인자 녀마 매와 질레 다다 레디오 받이다 곧 가소래 뭐 공부해도 좋아라 고 공부해도 좋아라 근데 삼다베 내가 저기 제 탈바 토베기 냠렌지에게 파고를 마선은 마 고주바로다 안델 직지도에 삼단 내가 저기 가오 공부하다 안지기 하수술하는 게 어디 야고 중시하서 뽑아게 와야다 내가 저기디 직지수이라 지고야 차야디 두 삼단에 직 소소소소야 저 땡아 돼야다 되네 직 뽑아 돼야다 되네게 야고도 와야 되네.
Take a moment now, but do this also in the future. Recall how you were some time ago before you had met the Dharma, perhaps even before you had heard the word Buddhism or Dharma. When you, at a time when you had no idea what the sufferings, what is meant by sufferings of samsara, nor what liberation was. And especially if there has been an extensive period of gaining knowledge and reflecting on that knowledge, you will have experienced your own spiritual development. You will have seen how you respond to stimuli differently than you did before. You'll see how what you value, what you prioritize, differs from before. So this we can come to recognize within ourselves now. It doesn't only happen later when we give rise to valid cognition in relation to the teachings and the teacher, as we've been hearing before. But right now, based on our own experience of inner development, conviction will arise. So this is important, because we need to recognize that through whatever amount of hearing and reflecting, and thereby habituation to the Dharma we have gone through, we need to see those results, recognize those results within us. We need to become our own cheerleader. We need to praise ourselves. And this sounds perhaps a bit counterintuitive, contrary to general behavior. But we are the only ones who know our own mind, who can see for ourselves our spiritual development. So recognize this, rejoice in this, so as to gain confidence in our ability, not to allow ourselves to be deceived by feeling diminished, that I can't, that it's too difficult, that it's beyond me, maybe a later life. Recognize what we have done so that we can gain confidence in our potential and in what we can still do in this life.
지게 건조라 최고부야다 딕버 샤장제라 소바 초사에게 조디 아니 디네갑서 지단 동반이요 검도 검고어데 이네 조디 아니 지게 디 가서래 선음이 초사에디 베스지 조로 능기서와.
What has been mentioned here is that when one gives rise to uncontrived definite emergence, it's at that point that one has crossed the boundary of being someone who aspires to attain a path to someone who has attained a path. And that path that one will newly accumulate or acquire is a path of accumulation. So what is it that is accumulated on this path? One accumulates merit. Here one focuses on the accumulation of merit as well as purification, through studying, reflecting, meditating, making offerings, and so forth. And in this way, having attained the path of accumulation, one's emphasis is on the accumulation of merit, which also includes purification.
냠nenchen dene tingezin jubyada jik jine jubya jine jubne ane tingezin shine jub dene dame ba to tongba yi to bi shine ko me jolam yi ne gapsoda tongba kansa dame ba le mi she ta da bo shine jub cholam yi ne gapsoda shine jub chane dame ba mi be tongba yi dame to be dame ba le mi be shine jub dene dame ba la mi be tongba ka so re shine di ngane ane laodong jubje ane shila sungte se dame yu dongba ni le mi bi shila sungte gi ge yode dene jolan ba se sha ru go re che jina da dongba ngana juge da yu da tingyu bu lu she ru dongba ni se wo da nyan de da ran je ka ri ne yu dongba ni le mi bi ge mi ne shine jub dene shine di ngane laodong jub ne laodong top yode shila sungte to go re jina shila sungte top dongba ni le mi bi shila sungte top yode Jolama chasonre, that Jolambe topa toba is what that. Did Solam to Solam Topje, that Solam Minerasu, Nanzuki, Dame Balami Bishine, Dene Dame Balami, Hardon Tubne, Hardon Tobion, she lost on the Togodi, the Tobion, and Garso, the Jolam said Togo, yes. On
the path of accumulation, one is striving for one's goal, liberation or enlightenment. And to attain it, one needs to develop the path that one has cultivated ever further. So the path of accumulation is the first of the 5 paths. In order to attain the second path, the path of preparation, one needs to accumulate and purify, accumulate vast amounts of merit and purify. And in one's meditations, one focuses on cultivating the wisdom realizing emptiness. Here, one is trying to realize emptiness with the union of calm abiding and meditative insight, because when one is able to do that, realize emptiness with the union of calm abiding and meditative insight, one will then have crossed the boundary from the path of accumulation to the path of preparation. In other words, one's consciousness will have developed the path of preparation. The path of accumulation will have been developed into the path of preparation. So one meditates, receives extensive teachings on emptiness, continues to meditate on emptiness, and each time one comes to recognize or realize emptiness, one tries to hold it with calm abiding, and later tries to hold it with calm abiding and meditative insight. One continues this process again and again, because emptiness, the realization of emptiness, is a very subtle object, and therefore it is more difficult to hold with a union of calm abiding and meditative insight. But eventually, when one does, when one realizes emptiness by means of a meaning generality, but with the union of calm abiding and meditative insight, then one crosses the boundary of progressing beyond the attainment of the path of accumulation to now having attained the path of preparation.
And the Tolam said the Chargor, that got Jolam no Topa Combe Shinje, Tony Wasum the Toba, and got Tonam Pachabare, Cogula, Chesa Tonam Parshemalam said the Kiavare. That Chineco, Manazu, Yomoba, Densin, Kuntagi, Nimbo, Saboni, Shine Kiavarco, Saboni Kiere, Kiagore. Saboni, Nimbo, Densin Kuntagi, Nimbo the Kiavare, Tonam Toy, Tony Wasum the Don do, that Tonam Pachason, the Gansati. Di lam tongpa yin da nyampa she nyamsha she de la tongyi kasa tonglam si korwa di nyamsha she di tenzin gunda ki nyambo re tenzin gunda ki sabon ki nyambo re da pa pang nyambo di re da di nye la nguen yin ni kiye yamba re nguen yin jesa da tonglam bar she malam si da tonglam dangbo kiye de tonglam bar she malam le gire di tonglam bar she malam di da korongi 방제 densin 군다다 densin 군다의 사문이 뭐이 년보들이 해시래다.
Primary focus of the yogin on the path of accumulation is the accumulation of merit, as well as meditating on emptiness. When the path of preparation is achieved, which is when emptiness is realized with a mind that is the union of calm abiding and meditative, when emptiness is realized by means of a meaning generality with a mind that is the union of calm abiding and meditative insight, then the path of preparation is achieved. On the path of preparation, the primary focus is reversed from the path of preparation, from the path of accumulation. Now on the path of preparation, the primary focus is on the meditation on emptiness, with a secondary focus on the accumulation of merit. So this now is reversed from the path of accumulation, where the primary focus was on accumulation of merit, and secondary to that, meditation on emptiness. Now on the path of preparation, where emptiness is in every meditation repeatedly realized by means of a meaning generality, by a consciousness which is the union of the calm abiding and meditative insight. This is trained in again and again, repeatedly over a sustained period, until emptiness is realized directly. In other words, not by means of or via a meaning generality, but directly. So here, emptiness is now, for the first time, realized directly. The consciousness will still be a union of calm abiding and meditative insight, but emptiness is realized not by means of a meaning generalities or inferentially, but directly. When emptiness is directly realized, in that moment, the path of seeing is attained. The practitioner is suitable to be called an Arya being, a noble being, and they attain an uninterrupted path, which is the antidote to the acquired ignorance of true grasping, as well as its seeds. So that all happens in that same moment. I'll repeat that again. When emptiness is realized directly for the first time, it will again be with a union of calm, abiding, meditative insight. And in this moment, the path of seeing is attained. The path of preparation is now cultivated into the path of seeing. An uninterrupted path is attained, and that uninterrupted path, this first moment of the path of seeing, is the direct antidote to the acquired ignorance of self-grasping and its seeds.
Denigida Tonam Tamboyan de la Ming Carson Tonam Parche Molam Lagore. Just the Nyandugi Lam Yamnajina, Nyandu Tonam Parche Molam Sigurua. Gansa Nyam Tonam Bajorua, Nyandugi Lam Yamnajina, Tonam Dambo de la Nyandugi Tonam Parche Molam Lagore. Ranja in Yamnajina, Ranja Tonam Parche Molam Dua Gansadi, Nadua, Chisam Tontam Bache Molam Lagore. Gans di Tonam Parche Molam di. Tachi Chue Gonchore, Lamden Re, Tolambar, Dongbang, Osum Don, called Lamden Chasson, this is Tempashina, the Lamden said it, just not Tabatoy Lamiso, Lamden said it. Gansadi, Papa Charwa, just a Gidun Goncho Chare, Gidun Goncho, Di Lam Tolam di, Parshiman Tolam di, Chue Goncho. Just other Yap Sumnane, Sanji Goncho, Chue Goncho, Gidun Gonchinane. Gansadi Gedun Goncho Chabare, Kuyu Tonlamdi, Chue Goncho Chabare. Gansa Sum, the Jelly de Mashi share, that is she, that the Gansa de Nyandu Lam Yamne Chicken, and the Nyandu Balas, or the Randian Image, the Ranjabas, I think also Tarba de Kishurova. Then also Nyandu Shisha shares and you are Nyandu Shisha. Nyandu Lam Yamne Chirimba, Tisha and Jiva Chagurwa.
So thus far, and continuing, I'm describing the paths of the Tibetan practitioners, the hearers and solitary realizers. No reference to the bodhisattvas, that we'll discuss another time. But here now, the either hearer or solitary realizer, the Tibetan practitioner, has come to directly realize emptiness. And in this moment, they attain a path of seeing. And that is the first moment of the path of seeing is an uninterrupted path, which is the direct antidote to the acquired ignorance of self-grasping and its seeds. And this person, whether a hearer or a solitary realizer, is suitable to be called an Arya hearer or an Arya solitary realizer. They have now attained the what is this term? And they have attained the Arya's uninterrupted path to. So this is kind of repeating what was said before. Thus far, they have attained the hearer's uninterrupted path, which is a direct antidote to the acquired ignorance of self-grasping and its seeds. Or, if they are a solitary realizer, they have attained the solitary realizer's antidote to the acquired ignorance of self-grasping and its seeds. And either of these practitioners, in this moment, have achieved a true path. So we think of the Four Noble Truths, a true path. They have now achieved. They have attained a path that is true for an Arya being, because they are now an Arya being. So they have attained a true path. Not only that, so this is all from that very first moment, then when they've realized emptiness directly. Not only have they realized emptiness directly, Not only that, but they've acquired this uninterrupted path. They are now suitable to be called an Arya being. They have attained a true path. Them as a person, all in this first moment, who is now an Arya being, is also suitable to be called a Sangha jewel, an illustration of a Sangha jewel. Their consciousness, which has now realized emptiness directly, their consciousness is an illustration of the Dharma jewel. This true path that they have cultivated is a Dharma jewel. So the meditator is suitable to be called an Arya, an illustration of the Sangha jewel, and this consciousness that is realizing emptiness directly, this is a true path and is suitable to be called the Dharma jewel. This all happens in the moment that the consciousness that was the path of preparation becomes the path of seeing, where emptiness is directly seen. In that moment, the practitioner becomes suitable to be called an Arya hero or Arya solitary realizer and a Sangha jewel, and this consciousness that is directly realizing emptiness is a true path and an illustration of the Dharma jewel.
Denege tomba nyungosumde doane dene gyuni goyo mare gyuni bo denege lamsa geji nibadela ane tonlam namjolam said mingde da topong gore namjolam jide namjolam ne da tenzin kunda ge sabon pangbi ge gokden togo gore gokden lamsa geji nibane gokden do di gokden da chögon jorwa chögon jor chagore 당보 발시 말람디 최고죠 람덴체 디제라 안에 진주군다 빵비 빵보 고든 토요도 야 최고죠 지기 니유지로 고된다 람덴니가 최고죠 통람 기시로 통람 당보디 발시 말람니세 디기지니바데 남조람시고 통람 진주군다 빵비 빵도 람데라 남조람 통람 Tembashi nane kaze lamden sikruwa. Chiza namdro lamne bacho malna da namdro lamne lamden la gore. Lamden rwa da. Niga chasang dene ya chasang lamden chasang lamden ya chakro da. Da dene ki namdro lamde towe du denzing kuda pangbi pangba sabana pangbi pangba towe. Di pangba di da gokden re. Chiza chwe kuncho, di ya chwe kuncho rwa. Denzing kunda pangbe pangba chiyorwa, di gokden reje, dera chwe kuncho siyorwa, go ming rwa chwe kuncho sumi nane kushon kuncho sa chiyorwa.
The explanation in these prior two segments were explaining the moment that a true path is achieved, the path of seeing is attained, and the mind that is the path of preparation becomes the path of seeing. So that's all that happens in that one moment. In the very next moment, so in that first moment, amongst what I said, an uninterrupted path is achieved. In the next moment of the consciousness, it becomes a liberated path. Becomes a true cessation. It's a true cessation and a true path. In that first moment, which is an uninterrupted path, that is a true path. The second moment, it becomes a liberated path, and this liberated path is still a true path, but it's also a true cessation, and it is also an illustration of the Dharma jewel. So here, in the second moment, the hero or solitary realizer Arya being has abandoned the acquired afflictions together with their seeds. The moment prior to that, they had attained the antidote to the acquired afflictions together with their seeds. Now with the liberated path, those have been abandoned, and the first true cessation is achieved. The prior moment and the second moment are both illustrate that those consciousnesses, both moments of consciousness, are true paths. The second moment is the true cessation, both moments of consciousness are Dharma jewels. The person who has all this going on in their consciousness, or suitable to be labeled in this way, remains a Sangha jewel, remains an Arya being.
난 내 통남로와 나전에 그 수냠샤를 수당지 제도를 지고랑 수남이 소사야다. 근데 소사제 수남자서 아니 양자 동번이나 냠바샤고래. 디야 통남바래. 냠바샤네 네 간삼질이야 아니 곰남자 곰남스 토고래세. 지선 딘진 한기에들이야 딘진 한기기 다 첨보 락바 락쇼디 냠보시 기용도 아니 곰람이야 차송하래 해지래 다 곰람이야 딘진 한기여와 딘네 락락과지 딘진 한기를 차라 망보여와 딘네 락과디기 원인 유래기여도 동반이 원인 오이조도 아니 곰람 사대 도바래 해지래 당보 통람디 냠샬로 수당 대짐바다에다 같이 수남 소사 양자 동반이나 냠바샤고래 당보 냠바샤야디 통람래 대는 냠바샤네 디니 냠샤디 이시 동반이 또 불로디 딘진 한게 락바디기 냠보 송여도 원인 송도 다 곰람 바샤송아래 제래
이거서 데니디 공투 시제마 임파마캬바 제마
동반이 냠바샤로와 냠바샤 산에 당보니 대되로와 야랑고마로와 진짜 당보 냠바샤네 고묘도 통람래제 디바 곰제 뉴발마다 체신제 딘질 한지 임보조도 원인 차도 곰람 차송어레스 냠샤를 당고 말 빨아들 냠샤 샤탄 찍르디 당보 냠샤 샤제 냠바 당보 냠바샤 통람래 다디 냠바샤 베가데 곰네 뉴바 체신제 ane tenzin hangi rakpa digi nyembo songyo du ngonye songyo du no gomlam ba cha song re nyamja dango ma de nyamja chigre 당보 통람 딜레 냠레 주 통람 딜레 남저 람 딜레 냠바 당제 수남 소사 차세 고라데 최고 부디제 디니 차선네 다 동년의 냠바 샤고 레제레 다디 냠바 샤네 당보 냠바 샤도 통람 레제 데 냠바 샤네 냠샤디 뉴바 체르 친제 딘센 한기 첨보 침보 락바 디고 원년 차여도 곰람 바 차송 레제 람도 곰람 차레 가사도 곰람 바세야 공배 침바레제 다시 동방이는 냠바 초선 산에 동방님라 샤디 곰든 찍나로 레제 곰든 찍나로
그래서 곰든 찍나로
당보 곰든 당보 고주디디 통람 레제 대디 뉴베 체르 친제 냠자 튠지레 뉴베 체르 친데 뇨모 닝님보 송이도 곰람 차송 레제레
So thus far, I've presented the progress that is required to attain the initial path, the path of accumulation, how to progress so as to attain the second path, the path of preparation, and thereafter how to develop so as to attain the third path, the path of seeing. And in the last few segments, described the first moment and then the second moment of the path of seeing. Staying in that one meditation, because thus far I've described two moments of the consciousness that is now suitable to be called a path of seeing, a Dharma jewel, a true path, and then a true cessation. Thereafter, in the same meditation session, the meditator, the yogin, is accumulating vast stores of merit, now that emptiness is being realized directly. And this merit enables or causes their realization of emptiness, their direct realization of emptiness, to become even deeper, more profound. So thus far, they have abandoned the quiet afflictions together with their seeds. So here, what they are eradicating is true grasping. But true grasping exists, there are varying levels of subtlety, of coarseness to true grasping. So in the same meditation session, in the same meditative equipoise, wherein the path of seeing is achieved, with the first moment being an uninterrupted path, and the second moment being a liberated path. Now, through the power of this merit that's being accumulated and the ongoing meditation, a subtler level of true grasping is also eradicated. And whilst this is a subtler level of true grasping, in that it is subtler than the level that's just been abandoned, it is still a very coarse level. But with its abandonment, now the path of meditation is achieved. So in the same meditation session, the practitioner has gone from being an ordinary being to becoming an Arya being, who has attained the path of seeing, and thereafter, in the same meditation, also achieves the path of meditation.
Denige da gomlam tho sewe che da dene jige ma dongba ni le nyamba komne ane jig densin da nyomo ba sabon langi ge sabon ne je ba bang de dene tarba se de to ba re ji da ngele na ne da tarbi ko ba se to ba re ji re to go re ji anje jele sina da gomlam tho sa ba da gomlam tho sa ne da ko nyamlen ji je dongba ni le nyamba che gom gyap che 냠샤 지고 빠라를 초선음 사사와 용으로 빠라를 냠샤 샤바 용으로 되는 냠샤 샤네다 동반이로 곰제네 간실레 타르토네 뇽모베 사본 바차든 사본 뇽모베 사본네 지바 빵요도 타르바세 토바레스 바차 빵요 말 뇽모바다 뇽모 사본네 지바 빵요 타르바세 토바레 지다당에 녜레 나네 타르바세 토바레지 네 자주마 간사데 자주마 샤송으로 와
This yogin, who's now attained the path of preparation, will end this meditation at some point, but will continue, as we've been hearing, to repeatedly over a sustained period, continue the spiritual practice, regularly meditating on emptiness, between the meditations on emptiness, accumulating virtue. And as they continue to enter meditative equipoise on emptiness, they will eliminate ever subtler levels of true grasping, abandoning their true grasping and its seeds at ever subtler levels, their true grasping and its seeds at ever subtler levels. And this is then their progression along the path of meditation. And eventually, they will eradicate true grasping together with their seeds in its entirety. They will then attain the state where they are liberated or freed from true grasping and their seeds. And at this point, the path of meditation is fully actualized. The practitioner arises as either a hero arat, a hero foe destroyer, or a solitary realizer arat, a solitary realizer foe destroyer. This then is where their particular goal of definite goodness, of liberation, is achieved.
So
the attainment of the state of an arat, that's a great achievement, and I think we can rest there for now. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
But, Tseba?
There's just one thing I have difficulty with. I think not just a grammatical thing, that the second moment of the path of seeing, where you have, first of all, you have the uninterrupted path of seeing and then the liberated path. That liberated path is the path, and both of those are consciousness. That liberated path has a true cessation. It wouldn't be also a true cessation. So true cessation is an emptiness. It is a non-affirming negation, so it wouldn't be a consciousness, in my understanding. So I think it was a grammatical thing, because I think it was sort of said that the path of liberation is also a true cessation, whereas more, it has a true cessation.
So if I understand you correctly, I'll correct myself, and then you tell me if I corrected myself correctly. But the second moment of the path of seeing is that consciousness is the same consciousness, it's this continuum of consciousness, because it's just a moment. It is here suitable to be called a true cessation.
No.
It has attained a true cessation.
It's attained a true cessation.
It's attained a true
It's not a
cessation.
true cessation because that's a non-affirming negation and it couldn't be a consciousness.
Okay.
They're
Okay.
mutually exclusive.
Okay. So the second moment of a path of seeing has attained a true cessation. It is not a true cessation because it is a consciousness, and a true cessation isn't a consciousness.
Yeah,
It is a non-affirming negation. It is
the liberated
emptiness.
path is not a true cessation.
Yeah. Okay, let me just...
남조 람시. tembe lamden res. lamden re. tembe so dunga tembo kunjo tembo kokten lamden ra kokten. 남조 람디 kokten ma 남조 lam la du lamden re. 지전 sabun pangba labna kokten re. 토구 어래. 남조 람 토바는 kokten 토바니 뒤념 레제. 뒤념도 토고래.
So Seppel's completely correct. The second moment of the path of seeing is, of course, it's a consciousness. It is a true path. It has a, how to say? So a true cessation has been attained in that the afflictions, the acquired true grasping, the acquired affliction of true grasping together with their seeds has been abandoned, and therefore a true cessation has been attained. But the consciousness itself is not a true cessation. It is a true path, but a true cessation has been attained. Good. Thank you. All right. Thank you.